Hi everybody, this is Joseph from the MTG Thoughtcast channel, your host for Outlaws of Thunder Junction Daily Spoilers. Today we've got a cool one. We're talking about some horses. We're talking about some mono white ramp. Before we get into any of it though, if you like this type of content, you want to see more of it, you want to see this face on your feed more often, go ahead and hit all those buttons down below. Likes, comments, subscribes help us out a ton. We are unbelievably close to 100 subscribers and we have some really cool stuff coming to celebrate that. So let's fast track that. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Let's get to 100 soon. As well, if you want to join in the discussion for all of these spoilers and all things Magic, you can join our Discord down below. It's totally free. We love hanging out with everybody. Come hang out with us. After all that, let's go ahead and get into today's daily spoilers for Outlaws of Thunder Junction. First one we're talking about is Calamity Galloping Inferno, which is a 6-mana legendary creature horse mount. It's a 4/6. I'm unbelievably excited about this one. So it's a 4/6 with haste and says whenever it attacks while saddled, its saddle cost is 1. Choose a non-legendary creature that saddled it this turn and create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of it. Sacrifice that token at the beginning of the next end step. Repeat this process once. So it's like you put Kiki Jiki on an attack. Immediately what comes to mind is this goes nearly infinite with Port Razor. So for 5 mana, whenever he deals combat damage to a player, you untap each creature you control. There's an additional combat phase. So the Calamity makes 2 copies of that if you are only crewing with Port Razor. So he'll make 2 copies that are tapped and attacking. They'll both deal damage, and you'll get to untap everything, take extra combats. You can keep crewing, or you can keep saddling. I'm definitely going to say crew more often. You can keep saddling Calamity and keep taking extra combats from this with all the tokens you're creating. So Port Razor is going to be unbelievable with this. Zealous Conscripts is just a card that you should be playing more often if you're playing red, but with Calamity, you're going to play Zealous Conscripts, steal something of an opponent's, then saddle with both of those, swing with Calamity, make a token copy of both the Zealous Conscripts and the thing that you stole, or 2 more Zealous Conscripts to steal 2 more things that you can attack with. Well, you won't be able to attack with those in combat, but you'll be able to steal them. So if you're playing any Sacrifice Outlets and Ashnod's Altar, something like that, this is going to be a very powerful way to just remove any problems on your opponent's board. So Calamity is a deck that I'm very excited about and will be keeping my little eye on. Moving on from that, we have Claim Jumper, which is 2 and a white for a 3/3 Rabbit Mercenary with Vigilance. This is some of the strongest mono white catch-up ramp that we've seen. So when Claim Jumper enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for a Plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then if an opponent controls more lands than you, repeat this process once. If you search your library this way, shuffle. So we've seen a lot of like Knight of the White Orchid that does this once, but to have this on something with only 1 white pip that's also a 3/3 with Vigilance, it's a very relevant body that probably is going to get you 2 lands when it enters. That's mega strong. I'm expecting to see Claim Jumper and be playing Claim Jumper in a lot of my commander decks. Doc Arlock, Grizzled Genius, is our next card. It's green and a blue for a 2/3 Bear Druid. He's very simple. He says spells you cast from graveyards or from exile cost 2 less to cast, and then plotting cards from your hand cost 2 less. So he doesn't do any of that on his own. He doesn't support any of that, but this is going to be a very crucial piece. And if you play like a Sultai Graveyard deck, or like I play Tokasha Digsite Mentor, which is kind of a Bant Graveyard deck, that also casts some things from exile from sometimes, Doc is going to be a huge part in making those decks run smoothly. And then if you're playing a plot deck, or if you have any plot cards, they cost 2 less. Doc is going to be very cool in the decks that want him. He's going to be a very crucial part. Moving on from that, we have Ariet the Beguiler on this very nice wanted poster. So it's 1 white, blue, and a black for a 4/4 legendary creature with lifelink. When an aura you control becomes attached to a non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to that aura's mana value, gain control of that permanent for as long as that aura is attached to it. So Ariet is going to be turning your other auras into control magics for more than likely tokens and mana dorks, but that still is going to be enough to start snagging things. So if you play like a Curiosity on an Elvish Mystic, then you're all of a sudden going to be shorting somebody on their mana, and then you have a 1/1 for as long as you have Curiosity attached to it. This is going to be really good with something like Zur the Enchanter. It's probably worth playing Zur with Ariette and vice versa. Zur just searches for an enchantment with mana value 3 or less when he attacks, puts it onto the battlefield, and you can attach it to anything. So he'll be able to go and find your All That Glitters and attach it to your opponent's Esper Sentinel, that kind of thing. Girid, Mirror of the Wilds is the next one. It's red, green, and a white. You really would think that this is a commander set, but it is standard. So it's a legendary creature. It's a 3/3 with haste, and it says non-token creatures you control have tap to create a token that's a copy of target token you control that entered the battlefield this turn. So it's sort of a populate ability, but giving that to all of your creatures, all of your non-token creatures, is very, very good. So I think where this is going to be strong is with things like Kiki Jiki that make a token copy of something that then gets gone at your next end step. So if you tap Kiki Jiki, make a copy of something. Another great deck for Zealous Conscripts as well. If you're playing Kiki Jiki, you normally would have to get rid of that token. Instead, you could tap something like Girid and make an extra copy of it that's not going to get gone at your end step. It's not going to get exiled or sacrificed or whatever. So getting extra value from things like Kiki Jiki, Splinter Twin, they're all the same effect. It's just making extra copies of a creature. There is a plethora of combos you can play with this, with like Restoration Angel, Zealous Conscripts, Felidar Guardian. The list goes on and on. But Girid is going to be a great new commander for those. Moving on from that, we have Laughing Jasper Flint, which is 1 black and a red for a legendary creature. It's 4/3. It's a lizard rogue. It says creatures you control but don't own are mercenaries in addition to the other types. So it adds them into the outlaw group. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library, where X is the number of outlaws you control. Until the end of turn, you may cast spells from among those cards, and mana of any type can be cast for those spells. Can be spent to cast those spells. So this strikes me as more powerful than it reads, because as you continue to dig further into somebody's library and get more of their creatures, those creatures are turning into outlaws because they're on your side, and he gives them the mercenary subtype. So if you play this on its own, you exile the top card. And then if you snag a creature with that, you play it, and then all of a sudden you have 2 outlaws, and then now you're digging 2 cards down, and maybe you play 2 creatures. This is Magical Christmas Land, but you can see how this would snowball very fast. This is all just on his own, so he's going to create unbelievable amounts of value completely on his own, let alone if you're playing other outlaws with him. So I'm a big fan of Laughing Jasper Flint. Sorry. Lila Undefeated Slickshot is our next one. It's 1 blue and a red for another legendary creature. It's a human rogue. It's a 3/3 with prowess, and says when you cast a multicolored instant or sorcery spell from your hand, exile that instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. If you do, it becomes plotted, so you'll be able to play it again for free later. So she's giving some extra value to things like charms or anything that you'd be playing with, like Niv Mizzet Reborn. So she's going to be an auto include in this kind of deck where Niv Mizzet is looking for 10 color pairs. You'd be playing some multicolored instants and sorceries. On from here, we have one last job, which is 2 and a white for a sorcery with Spree. So it has +2 to return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, +1 to return a mount or a vehicle from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then another +1 to return an aura or equipment from the graveyard to the battlefield attached to a creature you control. This is a lot. These Spree cards are really speaking to me in the set. First of all, 5 mana in white alone to reanimate a creature is something we don't see very often, so that's ticking some boxes for me. And then an additional 1 on 2 different abilities to return a mount or a vehicle, and then return an aura or an equipment. Gears Return in here, this seems very neat. So that's 4, 6 and a white is going to get you all 3 of those. If you can do that, it's going to be in a deck like SRAM, where he cares about auras, equipments, and vehicles. So you're going to have a lot of those in the decks. One Last Job is going to be a really great recurrence piece in those. Another deck that's going to be great with this is Greasefang, because he cares about having vehicles in your graveyard. So for 5+1, you're going to be able to reanimate a creature and a vehicle with Greasefang, let's say Greasefang dies. You get to reanimate Greasefang, reanimate a vehicle. Greasefang reanimates another vehicle. It's going to be a part of a very powerful chain. So look out for one last job. Ornery Tumblewag is one we actually saw leaked a while ago, but it was the first time we saw the saddle mechanic. But it's Ornery Tumblewag is 2 and a green for a 2/2 Brushwag mount. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a counter on target creature, and whenever it attacks while saddled, double the number of +1/+1 counters on target creature, and you can saddle it for 2. This is already a very powerful effect that has been a major player in Standard for the last couple of years on a white creature. So having an extra copy of that on something that's green, as well as the ability to attack and double the number of counters on something, is going to be very powerful. I'm looking out for this one in Standard. Speaking of very powerful green cards, we have Railway Brawler for 3 green. It's a Rhino Warrior with Reach and Trample, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you double its power with +1/+1 counters. So it puts X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is its power. It also has Plot for 3 and green. So what's great about this to me is the cleanest designed plot card that they've printed so far, or that they've spoiled so far. So what you're going to do with this is on turn 4, you're going to plot this. And then on turn 5, you're going to play it and another creature. Let's say you play the Rattleworm that we talked about a few days ago. That's a 4-mana 6/5 with Trample. If you plot this and then the following turn, play Railway Brawler, play the Rattleworm, all of a sudden you're going to have a 12/11 with Trample on turn 5. This card is going to break things, and I am excited to play it, and I'm very not excited to play against it. Moving on, we've got Rush of Dread. It's 1 black for a sorcery with Spree that has +1. Target opponent sacrifices half the creatures they control, rounded up. +2, target opponent discards half the cards in their hand, rounded up. And then another +2 of target opponent loses half their life, rounded up. So you can choose, obviously, any number of these, any combination of them with 1 each. But even just for 4 mana, for the first ability, making target opponent sacrifice half the creatures they control, rounded up, is nuts. If you're playing against like a token deck or something, you're just going to go, hey, sacrifice 10 creatures or something for 4, let alone if you're later in the game and can start adding the other costs onto this to make people discard cards or lose half their life. It does suck that it's targeted opponent. Obviously, this is a card that's actually made for Standard in a Standard set. Who would have thought? And probably is not going to see a ton of play in Commander. But similar cards, we have like a Pox that is just 3 mana for each player loses a third of their life, a third of the cards in their hand, a third of their creatures, and a third of their lands. Obviously a much stronger card, but it's still a very cool comparison. And then similarly, we have a Death Cloud, which is each player. So what's great about Rush of Dread is it doesn't target yourself. So this is exclusively for an opponent, and it's not a symmetrical effect like Pox or like Death Cloud. But Death Cloud X = 5 is going to be the same cost as doing all of the Spree abilities on Rush of Dread. And it's going to do, each player loses 5 life, discards 5 cards, sacks 5 creatures, sacks 5 lands. I don't think that Rush of Dread is going to be better than these cards in the formats that they're played in, but it still is very cool to have a very close copy of that be available for something like Standard. Last card we're going to be talking about today is Ty Joaquin Perfect Shot. This is a very cool space that they're starting to push Boros into, rather than just being the, oh, this is the equipment guy, or this is the combat focused commander, the angel or whatever. Ty Joaquin is 2 mana for a 2/3. It's a legendary human mercenary that says when a source you control deals non-combat damage to a creature equal to that creature's toughness, draw a card. And then for X and tap, if a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player this turn, it deals that much plus X instead. So she can boost up other sources of non-combat damage, both going to permanents and players. So what's cool with this, you play this with something like Zirda. You could companion this with Zirda the Dawnwaker in Commander and be able to reduce that X cost by 2 every turn. So you will be guaranteed to be able to do that for 2 every turn. And you're probably playing a deck that has a ton of activated abilities anyway. The card I'm excited about with Tor Joaquin is Goblin Sharpshooter. So it's 3 mana for a 1/1 that doesn't untap during your untap step. When a creature dies, untap it, and you can tap it to deal damage to a creature or a player. So with Tor Joaquin out, Ty Joaquin, very sorry. You can just boost that activated ability by, let's say, 4, and then all of a sudden your Goblin Sharpshooter can start shooting things for 5. And if that happens to be the equal to the creature's toughness that you're shooting, it definitely will be killing it, assuming it's not something that's indestructible. So you'll be able to untap the Goblin Sharpshooter and draw a card. So this is going to be very cool, very fun. Your opponents aren't going to like it, but it's a lot to set up. So there's this neat sniper thing that they're starting to do with Boros that I'm very into. That's all of our cards for today with Outlaws of Thunder Junction. We're starting, I feel like the wheels on the train are starting to slow down a bit, and we're getting into some sort of the nuts and bolts of the deck, or of the set, I'm sorry. It still feels very strange to me that this is a standard set. This feels like it should be a Commander Legends set with how many legendary creatures they're pulling out. But maybe this is just the new direction that they're pushing Magic in, is that if you're going to be playing it, you're probably playing Commander, and we want to give you a ton of options for that. And I'm here for it. That gives us plenty to talk about. Guys, thanks for watching today. This has been a fun one. So if you like this kind of content, give us some interaction down below. It means a ton to us, and come hang out with us in the Discord. I will see you on Monday, actually. I'm not doing any videos over the weekend. So I'll see you on Monday. Have a happy Easter, and I'll talk to you soon.